A child runs through endless fields of wheat, sun blazing above, a soft wind combing the horizon. From a distance, it looks like a dream golden, still, almost sacred. But step closer, and the sunlight starts to distort. Frogs explode, angels rot, and something behind all that brightness begins to whisper. Released in 1990, The Reflecting Skin wasn't a box office event or a festival darling. It was something harder to categorize, a fever dream stitched into celluloid, where the familiar becomes monstrous and every image is a riddle. Directed by Philip Ridley in his feature debut, this haunting film slipped beneath the surface of mainstream cinema and stayed there, waiting to be discovered by those willing to see past its glow. Often compared to Terrence Malick with a taste for horror, the film evokes innocence drowned in grief, memory reshaped by trauma, and a childhood so soaked in myth that even the audience begins to question what's real. It looks pastoral. It feels post-apocalyptic. There are no traditional monsters, just a world where the line between beauty and terror is razor thin. And behind the camera, a storm of creative control, quiet rebellion, and unsolved mysteries. A color palette that was altered without consent, a soundtrack that went missing for decades, and a child actor who never read the script. Every frame hides something. Every scene suggests another story beneath the one we're shown. This isn't just a cult film, it's a cinematic ghost, one that reflects more about you than you may be ready to see. Fact 1. Ampere World lit by artificial sunlight. One of the film's most defining features is its overwhelming brightness, those saturated, honey-drenched fields glowing like something out of a childhood memory. But none of that warmth was natural. In fact, it was all meticulously fabricated. The reflecting skin wasn't shot during the magic hour, nor did the landscape naturally shimmer with cinematic gold. The crew worked primarily during midday under a punishing Canadian sun, and to transform that flat light into something painterly, they built massive reflective rigs. These setups bounced sunlight using giant metallic sheets and amber-tinted filters, enveloping the actors in an unnatural glow. It was dangerous work. The temperature on set rose dramatically under the equipment. Cast members, especially the child actors, had to endure extreme heat while pretending to be carefree under the Sunday. The crew jokingly referred to the lighting setup as the Inferno, a nickname that stuck as skin blistered and tempers wore thin. The result was a dreamscape, a golden vision that hovered between memory and hallucination. But not everyone was pleased. American distributors expressed concern that the look was too lyrical for horror, and pushed for a color grade that softened Ridley's original vision. That golden sunlight, the very thing that defines the film's visual identity, was a layer of distortion, a lie told through light. And like all good lies, it was beautiful enough to believe. Fact 2. The monster was in the boy's mind. Dolphin Blue glides through the film like an apparition. Pale skin, sunken eyes, dressed in black. She exists at the edge of the story, part widow, part myth, part unspoken threat. For many viewers, she was the film's vampire. But she never drank blood, never transformed, never even threatened. Director Philip Ridley later clarified that Dolphin Blue was no supernatural being. She was simply a woman grieving in solitude, strange, yes, but entirely human. So why did she feel like something out of a gothic novel? Because the film doesn't give us the objective truth. It gives us Seth's version, a child trying to make sense of the world through imagination and fear. In his eyes, Dolphin becomes a monster because he needs her to be one, a scapegoat, a container for everything he doesn't understand. Death, abandonment, guilt, and Ridley designed her character that way. Her wardrobe, her home, her manner of speaking, all intentionally constructed to echo vampire tropes, only to unravel them. Even her fragility becomes suspect under Seth's distorted gaze. In the end, the real horror isn't Dolphin, it's the way innocence filters grief, and how easily the unknown becomes something to be feared. Fact 3. Marketing created a monster the film never had. The poster for The Reflecting Skin is startling. A child screams in stark monochrome, while behind him looms a shadow shaped like bat wings. To a casual viewer, it suggests a traditional horror movie, a vampire story, perhaps. But it's a fabrication. The image was created entirely after production wrapped. The child in the photo isn't the actor from the film. The lighting is artificial. The Batwing shadow? A deliberate addition by the marketing department. None of it appears in the movie. Why the deception? US distributors were concerned. Early test audiences described the film as slow, poetic, and confusing. Marketing executives saw a problem. How do you sell something that doesn't fit a genre? The solution was to reframe it, make it look like horror. Not psychological horror, not metaphorical horror, just horror. And so, a poster was born. one that promised something the film never intended to give. Audiences showed up expecting a blood-soaked thriller. Instead, they got sun-scorched sorrow and mythic dread. Many left angry, others left changed. The poster wasn't a summary, it was a mask. And masks, as the reflecting skin teaches us, are often the first lie we believe. Fact 4. The frog didn't die, but the rumor lived on. It happens early in the film, and it's impossible to forget. A boy inflates a frog like a balloon, then throws it onto a woman's porch, where it explodes in a visceral burst. It's grotesque. It's absurd. And it set the tone for everything that followed. Immediately after screenings began, audiences raised concerns. Was that a real frog? Animal rights groups demanded clarity. In the UK, the British Board of Film Classification held up certification until the filmmakers could provide evidence, footage, photos, behind-the-scenes documentation, proving no actual animals were harmed. They complied. The production team showed that the frog was a prosthetic, a rubber mold filled with gelatin, fake blood, and a compressed air device designed to rupture on cue. The effect was practical and, more importantly, legal, but not everyone was convinced. Rumors circulated that in early takes, a real frog may have been used and discarded. Some claimed crew members witnessed it. Others swore they saw something different in early festival cuts. Ridley denied it all. Still, the myth grew, and strangely, it fed into the film's unsettling power. Whether or not it was true no longer mattered. What mattered was that the moment felt real enough to believe and disturbing enough that people wanted it to be. Fact 5. Ampere's score that vanished into silence. The music in The Reflecting Skin doesn't guide you, it haunts you. Nick Bickett's score is delicate and mournful, as if composed by someone remembering a tragedy they never fully recovered from. And yet, for nearly 25 years, no one could find it. There was no official soundtrack release in 1990, no cassette, no vinyl, no CD. Bootlegs emerged fuzzy, low bitrate rips from VHS tapes, incomplete and mislabeled. For a time, fans believed the score had been lost completely. Then, in the mid-2010 seconds, Bichet located backup tapes buried in his personal archive, forgotten in a box, misfiled among unrelated projects. With careful restoration, the full compositions were recovered and finally released. One track in particular, Butterfly, struck a chord. It underscored both scenes of beauty and scenes of violence. It didn't just accompany the film, it mirrored its contradictions. That the music nearly disappeared felt appropriate. This was a story about things fading, slipping just out of reach. The score did the same until someone listened closely enough to bring it back. Fact 6. Viggo Mortensen brought the ghost with him. Cameron Dove is a man of few words, a soldier returned from war, hollowed out, emotionally absent, and seemingly half alive. In many ways, he's the film's quietest figure, and it was Viggo Mortensen's decision to keep him that way. Mortensen was cast only weeks before shooting began, replacing another actor who dropped out due to scheduling issues. Ridley needed someone who could carry the weight of grief without explanation. Mortensen didn't hesitate, but he had one request: strip the dialogue. He believed Cameron shouldn't speak more than necessary, that his trauma should be seen, not spoken. Ridley agreed, and much of the character's original dialogue was cut or rewritten into silence. What emerged was a performance defined by physical stillness and distant gazes. Mortensen moved like someone half buried, haunted not just by war, but by returning home to a place that no longer recognized him. He doesn't command the screen, he drifts through it, like a spirit already separating from the world. Fact 7. The star of the film didn't know the story. Jeremy Cooper, who portrayed young Seth Dove, wasn't just acting confused, he was confused. And that was exactly what director Philip Ridley wanted. From the beginning, Ridley made the unconventional and ethically debated choice to keep Jeremy largely uninformed. The child actor was never given a full script. He received only scene-by-scene direction, often minutes before the camera rolled. His emotional cues came not from rehearsals or preparation, but from whispered phrases Ridley fed him in real time. Imagine your stomach just disappeared. Pretend the sky is angry. Say the line like you're falling off the earth. That was the kind of guidance Cooper received. The goal? To capture something raw, a performance unsullied by technical training or narrative logic. Ridley didn't want an actor who understood the story. He wanted a child stumbling through a reality that didn't make sense. It worked. Seth's reactions feel detached, authentic, and at times, unnerving. But it also raised questions about manipulation and consent. Could a child give a real performance if he didn't know what the film was about? Or was that precisely why the performance worked? Decades later, Cooper admitted he still doesn't fully understand what the film was trying to say. Maybe that's why the film still speaks. Fact 8. The festival that rejected it for looking too good. At the Locarno Film Festival in 1990, The Reflecting Skin was screened and then sidelined. Judges debated whether it even qualified as horror. It had the structure, it had the dread, but it also had something they didn't expect: visual poetry. The film's golden palette, meticulous framing, and painterly compositions seemed too refined, too art house for the horror sidebar. One juror reportedly said, "It's not horror, it's literature with a lens." In the end, the film was quietly removed from genre competition, not because it was too disturbing, but because it was too aesthetically precise. That paradox became the film's identity: too dark for drama, too beautiful for horror, too honest for either. And so, like its characters, the film found itself adrift. Not rejected, exactly, but refused a place to belong. Fact 9. The angel was designed to decay. Of all the film's strange and symbolic images, none is more disturbing than the angel found decomposing in a barn, a grotesque hybrid of dead animal and misplaced reverence. It wasn't just makeup. The production team built the angel out of real biological material. Bits of whale, flesh, pig innards, and latex tubing were layered onto a rubber base and then left to ferment under hot lights. It wasn't a static prop. It changed. It rotted. It smelled so awful that crew members wore masks during shooting and rotated in shifts to work near it. Originally, Ridley had envisioned the angel as something dried and ancient, delicate, husk-like. But when the prop team presented this oozing, misshapen horror, he changed course. It was perfect. "This," he said, "is what happens when something divine falls to earth." No explanation is ever given in the film. The angel appears, then it's gone. Like most symbols in The Reflecting Skin, it isn't there to clarify anything, it's there to trouble you. Fact 10. The fire scene got too close to real. It's one of the most disturbing moments in the film. A young boy, soaked in gasoline, calmly sets himself ablaze as his friends watch in stunned silence. The horror of it lies not in the act itself, but in how quiet, sudden, and convincing it is. That conviction came at a cost. The scene was performed by a stunt double with limited experience in full-body burns. Safety measures were in place: flame retardant gel, a layered suit, emergency crews standing by. But something went wrong. The weather was unseasonably hot. The protective suit began to fail under the weight of direct sun and prolonged exposure. When the fire ignited, it spread faster than predicted. Flames climbed higher, licking at the exposed areas near the actor's neck. He stayed in character. The camera kept rolling. The shot was perfect, disturbingly so. Only after the take ended did the crew realize he'd sustained second-degree burns. No lawsuits were filed, no public statements were made, but Ridley later confided in an interview that he couldn't bring himself to watch the scene again. "It felt like I had gone too far," he said, and maybe he had. The burn looked real because it was too real for comfort. Fact 11. For years, fans thought it was a Lost American TV movie. Around 2001, a strange VHS rip began circulating among horror forums. The tape had no title, no credits, and only partial audio. The color was washed out. The aspect ratio was off. Yet the imagery was unforgettable: golden fields, angel fetuses, children in mourning. Online communities dubbed it the Dying Sunday. Many believed it was a long-lost made-for-TV horror film from the 1,970 seconds. Some thought it had been banned. Others speculated it was part of an obscure experimental anthology never aired in full. It wasn't until someone matched a single frame, the bloated angel in the barn, to a still from The Reflecting Skin, that the truth surfaced. What's strange is how much the film fit that myth. Its broken pacing, its dreamlike logic, its refusal to explain itself. It all felt like something half-remembered, something not meant to exist in full clarity. In that version, degraded and stripped of identity, the film became something else: an accidental artifact, a relic of grief in disguise. Fact 12. Those unmoving crows were drugged to stay still. Throughout the film, crows appear as silent observers perched in trees, still as statues, always watching. Their presence adds an eerie, unnatural calm to scenes already drenched in unease. They weren't fake. They were living birds sedated under veterinary supervision to remain motionless for extended shots. Tranquilizers were used to reduce their movement without fully immobilizing them. Handlers monitored the birds carefully, ensuring they didn't overheat or suffer physical harm. It was legal at the time. It would never be approved today. Even on set, the image made people uncomfortable. Crew members reported feeling unsettled by the birds' passivity, as if the animals knew something. and had chosen not to move. The resulting effect was undeniably powerful. The crows didn't flutter or caw, they simply stared. In a film built on suppressed emotion and hidden trauma, their stillness became another layer of silence, and silence, in the reflecting skin, always means something is about to break. Fact 13: the film's colors were altered without the director's consent. When people talk about the reflecting skin, they almost always mention the color, that golden, syrupy hue that coats every scene like honey over rot. But that color wasn't part of Philip Ridley's original vision, at least. Not entirely. The first version of the film featured a colder, bleaker color grade, subtler, less dreamlike, more in line with the story's underlying despair. But during post-production for the North American release, producers made a decision quietly and without informing Ridley. They ordered a full regrade. The goal was to make the film more visually marketable. The new color palette turned dry fields into gold leaf canvases. Shadows became less threatening. Pain felt more palatable. Ridley was stunned when he saw the final version. He had expected a meditation on decay. Instead, he got what he later called a story bathed in the very light it was supposed to distrust. Over the years, fans debated which version is correct. Some prefer the warmth, arguing that the contrast between visual beauty and emotional horror makes the film more disturbing. Others long to see Ridley's true, frostier original. But one thing is certain: the version we know best is, in part, an illusion, a lie told in golden tones. Fact 14: every actor got a different truth. The cast of The Reflecting Skin didn't work from a unified script. Instead, they operated inside a carefully controlled distortion, one shaped by Ridley's choice to give each actor a tailored interpretation of the story. Lindsay Duncan was told she was playing grief personified. Viggo Mortensen was instructed to act like a man who had already died and was only now realizing it. Jeremy Cooper, as we know, was given no real context at all. Dialogue was rehearsed, scenes were blocked, but no one was ever told the full truth. The result was a set filled with emotional dissonance. Characters didn't align because they weren't meant to. The film's unsettling tone didn't just come from its imagery, it came from the fractures between performances, between realities. Each actor inhabited a different version of the world, and that tension between understanding and confusion bled onto the screen. In a film about misperception, that might have been the most honest choice of all. Fact 15: Ampere's real child's grief inspired the final scene. The last image of The Reflecting Skin is unforgettable. Seth, framed by sky and firelight, howling in grief as his brother's body drifts lifeless in the water. It feels operatic, biblical, larger than any single life. But it was inspired by something very real and far more intimate. Years before making the film, Ridley had witnessed a tragic scene near the Thames in London. A drowned man was pulled from the river. On the shore, a young boy, perhaps 8 years old, stood silently, unmoving, watching as adults swarmed around the body. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, he just stared. That image haunted Ridley for years. When writing the final scene, he didn't want catharsis. He wanted that moment of stillness before grief even knows what to be. Seth's scream isn't about closure, it's about impact. The moment the world reshapes and a child is left standing in a new reality he never asked for. It wasn't about death. It was about the terrifying realization that life keeps going anyway. Fact 16: the film began as a rejected play. Before The Reflecting Skin was a feature film, it was a play one that no one wanted to produce. Philip Ridley originally penned a minimalist one-act piece titled Seth's World, set entirely in a single decaying room. It focused on the internal world of a disturbed child, a grieving woman, and a distant brother who may or may not have been real. The dialogue was sparse, the logic dreamlike, the horror implied. Theaters rejected it immediately. Too abstract, too ambiguous, too emotionally violent. One literary manager reportedly returned the script with just 2 words scribbled across the cover: absolutely not. But Ridley wasn't finished with the story. Years later, he translated its skeletal core into cinematic form. The fields replaced the walls. The silence deepened. The horror became visual. Traces of the play remain in the film's DNA in the way characters speak past one another, in the theatrical blocking, in the sense that no one quite shares the same reality. The structure never left the stage. It simply expanded until it swallowed the landscape. What began as a failed stage experiment became one of the strangest and most poetic horror films ever made. Fact 17: Ampere's silent elegy for a vanishing generation. Though it never states it outright, The Reflecting Skin has long been interpreted as a coded response to the AIDS epidemic. The parallels are there. a mysterious illness that strikes young men, a community that responds with fear and silence, a child left to imagine his own explanations for suffering no one wants to name, Cameron's gradual wasting, the coded language around his sickness, the isolation. Early versions of the script even included a reference to a disease that eats you from the inside, later removed. Ridley never confirmed the connection directly, but he didn't deny it either. "Sometimes grief is easiest to tell in disguise," he once said. In this light, the film becomes more than a coming-of-age nightmare. It becomes a requiem not just for Seth's brother, but for an entire era of invisible loss. It's not allegory, it's grief, dressed in metaphor, whispered through light and shadow. Fact 18. It silenced the director's career for nearly a decade. The Reflecting Skin was supposed to launch Philip Ridley's directing career. Instead, it stalled it. The film received a scattered release and a confused critical reception. It was too surreal for mainstream critics, too quiet for horror fans, and too strange for studio execs. No one knew where to put it, and that uncertainty extended to Ridley himself. Despite praise from certain corners and a handful of festival honors, Ridley found himself shut out of new projects. Scripts he pitched were rejected, collaborations fell through, studios politely passed. Even actors associated with the film felt its quiet weight. Lindsay Duncan found herself typecast in melancholy roles. Jeremy Cooper never acted again. Mortensen, years away from stardom, distanced himself from the project. It wasn't scandal that sank Ridley's momentum, it was ambiguity. He had made a film no one could categorize, and the industry punished him for it. It would be nearly a decade before he directed another feature, and The Reflecting Skin, like its creator, would sit in silence waiting to be rediscovered. Fact 19. The MPAA couldn't define the horror, so it tried to silence it. When The Reflecting Skin was submitted to the Motion Picture Association of America, MPAA, for U.S. distribution, the response was swift and strange. The film was threatened with an X rating, but it wasn't for graphic violence, nudity, or explicit content. It was for unease. The MPAA objected to the film's overall tone, its treatment of children in disturbing situations, its lingering atmosphere of dread, and especially the implied intimacy between Seth and Dolphin Blue. There was nothing overt, but there was something the board found indefinable and that they couldn't tolerate. Ridley refused to make cuts, not one frame, so the film never received a theatrical MPAA rating in the US. It was released direct to VHS, unrated and unadvertised, without marketing, without press support, and without the seal of approval studios required at the time. The irony? Films with far more explicit content were passed with R ratings that same year. But The Reflecting Skin, restrained, poetic, and ambiguous, was deemed too dangerous, not for what it showed, but for what it suggested. Fact 20. The title has no official meaning and that's the point. The Reflecting Skin, the title alone is an enigma. Is it literal, metaphorical, symbolic? Fans have dissected it for decades. Some say it refers to the way skin, especially under harsh light, mirrors emotion, damage, or decay. Others interpret it as a metaphor for memory. Skin reflecting not just physical experience, but trauma, guilt, even desire. A few see it as religious, perhaps the skin of the angel, the shell of the divine, returning to earth as something perishable. In every interview, Philip Ridley has refused to explain it. He said only this: the title is a mirror. If you look into it long enough, you'll see something you weren't expecting. Maybe that's the point. It's not a riddle meant to be solved. It's a surface, one that reveals as much about the viewer as it does the film. The title doesn't answer a question. It asks one and dares you to keep staring. Bonus fact: the dream landscape was paved over. The landscape in The Reflecting Skin feels almost sacred. Endless wheat fields shimmer under an unforgiving sun, as if time itself had paused somewhere in the 1,950 seconds. Roads vanish into nothing. Barns groan like relics from a vanished era. The world looks empty, timeless, a place that could exist only in memory or myth. But it did exist, and now it doesn't. The film was shot on location in the farmlands of rural Alberta, Canada. At the time, it was private property, wide, open, and untouched by development. Ridley chose it specifically for its stillness, for the way it looked like the edge of the world. But within a few years of the shoot, the land was sold. The barn was demolished. The fields were subdivided and paved over. Today, much of what was once The Reflecting Skin's dreamscape is now paved roads, chain-link fences, and housing developments. The dirt path where Seth screamed is now part of a paved access road leading to a supermarket parking lot. Fans who visited the area say the transformation is almost violent, like waking from a dream and finding your bed has been replaced with concrete. There are no plaques, no memorials, no signs that something haunting and beautiful was ever filmed there. In a way, that's fitting, because the reflecting skin was always about what vanishes when no one's looking, the moment when beauty dissolves into memory, and memory erodes into myth. The fields didn't just fade, they were erased quietly, completely, and without ceremony. Which of these truths changed the way you see the reflecting skin? Was it the angel made of decay? The color grade you were never meant to see? Or the final scream inspired not by fiction, but by something heartbreakingly real? Leave a comment and tell us, what do you think the film was really about? And what other forgotten stories should we bring back from the silent? If this film haunted you in ways you can't explain, like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because sometimes, the things we uncover aren't just weird, they're warnings left behind.